Friday. You made it through the week. Ms. Wright, you've almost made it through the week. Good job. Yeah, I am excited because the next time we get together, I will be there with you guys. It is kind of nice to be able to read outside in the backyard. I wish you guys were here. And then we could all just sit outside. But at the end of next week, we'll be at Hitchcock for most of those days. And we'll be able to spend most of our day outside, which I'm very much looking forward to. It looks like the weather's going to be good, so it should be super fun. If you haven't brought back your permission slip yet, make sure you bring it back on Monday, okay? Yesterday, when you guys were reading, you guys were paying attention to the sorts of things that got your thinking off track, and then how we work to get ourselves back on track. Also, not being one of those things that gets other people off track, because that interrupts other people's thinking. So, as I'm sitting out here, I am not under a redwood tree, but I am under a big walnut tree. And the whole ground, you guys can't really see, is just littered with black walnuts and cracked walnuts that the squirrels have been eating. And every once in a while, I'll hear the thud of a black walnut falling and hitting the ground near me, or hitting this picnic table that I'm sitting on. And so maybe it will hit me today on the head. That would get my thinking off track, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed that that does not happen. Today, we are going to continue to pay attention to our own thinking, and then we're also going to extend that into just asking questions and paying attention to what sorts of questions we have as a reader, okay? So we'll practice doing that today. Let's get started with chapter 6, which is called The Plan. Julian sat through the next day of school in a kind of a daze. As his teachers droned on and on, he became fixated on a single depressing thought. If he went to math camp and Mandarin camp all summer, he wouldn't have a real summer vacation for more than a year. 2 years of school without a break. Meanwhile, there were kids like Robin living in the United States of America who didn't even have to go to school at all. That was injustice. After school, he just lay on Danny's bed while Danny worked away on the latest email to Robin. When he finished, Danny read it out loud. May 25th. Dear Robin, nothing but bad news here. First, we haven't found out anything about your redwoods. Mr. CEO hasn't said a word. Are you sure you've got the right guy? Second, even if you do have the right guy, we are not going to be able to help you much more because it's official. Julian is being shipped off to math camp in 3 weeks. While you're up there having your vacation from not being in school, the dastardly duo, reaching new heights of evilness, are forcing poor Julian to spend his summer vacation doing algebra and learning Chinese. So, looks like you're losing your undercover agent, Lopez and Carter Lee. Julian watched a hummingbird dip into the feeder by Danny's window. You know, she doesn't like it when you write like that. She thinks you're making fun of her. Nah, she can take it. She's a big girl. It would be nice to give her some good news for a change. What, like, Julian had a long talk with his uncle and convinced him that cutting down the redwood trees is morally wrong? Be realistic. We're talking about Mr. CEO here. Yeah, I guess. They turned reluctantly to their homework. With the end of school approaching, their teachers were trying to cram as much into their heads as possible. Danny worked conscientiously for half an hour and then began to drum a syncopated beat with his pencil against his desk lamp. Finally, he turned to Julian and said, "Have you heard anything from your mom?" Julian reached into his back pocket, and the postcard was still there. He unbent it and handed it to Danny. "Very touching," Danny said. "Wish you were here. Very original." Be quiet." Julian studied the golden Buddha. "She's doing good. She's not in math camp." Danny flipped the postcard onto Julian's stomach and turned toward the computer. "Ooh, new message from Robin Hood. See, if she were offended, she wouldn't write back so quickly." Julian sat up and looked at the screen. May 25th. Dear Julian and Danny, I feel for Julian about math camp. Truly, that would be my worst nightmare, to be cooped up in a classroom all day, winter and summer. I think I would go crazy. I can't even stand to wear shoes for a day. Oh, love her. Hey, I just had the most brilliant idea. What if you guys came up here instead? Then you could see big tree growth for yourself and maybe figure out how to convince your uncle not to cut it down. On second thought, I guess your uncle isn't going to send you here when we're the ones fighting his logging plan. Okay, scratch that idea. Maybe it wasn't so brilliant after all. Robin. Julian hadn't even gotten to the end of the email when Danny cried out, "That girl is a genius! Danny, you can go to her house instead of math camp. It's perfect." It's not perfect. It's crazy. Why? Well, first, I'm all signed up for the High Sights Academy. Second, like Robin says, Sibley's not going to send me off to live with his enemies. Say it's an exchange program. Through fun. He won't even know. Come on. It would take Sibley about 2 seconds to figure out that they live next to Big Tree Grove. You always look on the dark side, Danny said in exasperation, and you have no sense of adventure. You're the most boring person on earth. You're going to live the boringest life ever, and then you're going to bore yourself to death. I don't see you running off to Robin's. Danny said in an airheaded voice. Am I like the one being sent to math camp here? Danny, there's no way. But Julian had pored over the pictures of Huckleberry Ranch on the Fun website until he knew them by heart. 2 goats, an orchard covered in pink blossoms, a mossy waterfall beneath towering redwoods, and for a moment, he imagined a summer without points, without shoes, without math camp. He could walk down the shady path into the forest, into Robin's redwoods. You guys, that is what I was really going to hope to happen, that I want him to go there instead of going to math camp. It seems like it makes sense. I wonder, here's the question. So I have a prediction, and many of you guys have predictions. And one thing that I think that kids sometimes do is we rush to make these predictions, but we also miss opportunities to ask questions related to our predictions. Okay, so my prediction, let's say, is that this is going to happen. He's going to go to Robin's instead of going to math camp. That evidence is supported by the picture. Also, it would be really boring if the rest of the book was about math camp, right? So that's my prediction. My question under that, and that's to get to a question, I have to focus on what I don't know, okay? So I think I know that they're going to do this. What I don't know is how they're going to do this. So my question is, how are they going to make this happen? Which leads me to another question. I might take some guesses at how this might happen. Maybe they'll go and just try to talk to Uncle Sibley, right? And maybe Uncle Sibley will say, sure, that sounds like a great idea. I don't care where you go as long as you're out of my hair. Okay, that might work. Maybe he'll just run away. Maybe his mom will come home and ask if he can go, or make sure he can go. Maybe Danny's parents will get involved somehow. So that's my question, is how might they go about making this happen? That's my question. And it's related to my prediction. You guys are great at making predictions. So now think about what questions you have too. All right, let's keep reading. Julian slipped into the house as the clock chimed at 7 and managed to settle into his designated chair just before Sibley stepped out of his office. After the perfunctory greetings, he was ignored. He picked discreetly at his salad, which was filled with nasty surprises like kidney beans and olives. Daphne was engaged in a long story about Preston's school auction, which Sibley interrupted with sarcastic outbursts. Sometimes, in restaurants, Julian would see large families gathered together, everybody laughing and talking at once, and he would study them, trying to figure out what made them so happy. Robin's family was probably like that. In his mind, Julian could see them clearly, a family of brawny Vikings, 3 giant sons, 2 fair daughters, living off the land and laughing at night around the dinner table. You know, we usually strive to be cheerful at the dinner table, not sullen. Julian realized Daphne was talking to him. Sullen. Wasn't that what Sibley had called him in the email? Sullen? Like his father? 1 point deduction. I'm sorry, Julian, but am I talking to myself? You really need to work on this. I didn't even hear you. That's exactly my point. Now Julian really did feel sullen, and he'd lost the trail of what he'd been thinking. He'd been going along some pleasant path in his mind, but what was it? Now there was only Daphne's smug expression. It's not fair, he said softly. Julian, his uncle warned. Talking back, another point. Daphne pursed her lips. I won't be treated this way in my own home. I hate this point stuff. 3 points, Julian. Daphne could have been calling out a tennis score. Camp's not starting a moment too soon, she added under her breath. 30 seconds ago, he'd been sitting at the table minding his own business, and now somehow everything was his fault. He'd blundered into another one of Daphne's stupid invisible traps. I don't care about these stupid points, he blurted out. Why don't you leave me alone? Why do you hate me so much? Sibley stared at him for a moment with unblinking eyes, and then he cleared his throat and said in a strained voice, Julian, you're out of line. This may be hard for you to understand, but the fact that you're my brother's son creates certain obligations. You owed him one, Julian said. No, Sibley said immediately. No, he owed me. I never owed him a thing. I gave, he took. That's the way it was. Julian's cheeks flushed, and he felt like he'd been slapped, and he lowered his eyes and bit his lip. But he was your brother, right? Preston said in a worried voice. So you didn't mind giving him stuff? Of course, Sibley turned his glassy eyes toward Preston. Of course I didn't mind. Yeah, it sounds like it, right? Julian couldn't breathe. Something was squeezing the air out of his chest. He stood up abruptly and took his half plate to the kitchen, and then he ran up the staircase and into his room, locked the door, and threw himself on the bed. He blinked hard 3 times and turned on his back and stared up at the blank square of the ceiling. So that comment about Sibley, like from Sibley about his brother, Julian's dad, who, as we know, is dead. I mean, I know some of you are like, well, maybe he's not dead, but from what we know right now, he is dead. Yeah, he's like, no, I didn't know him anything. I gave and he took. That's the way it was. I wonder what he's talking about there. Did he loan his brother some money? Like, what is that strained relationship? It's obvious that Sibley didn't really get along with his brother. So I'm just curious, what was Julian's dad like? And what was their relationship like? We don't know. Again, I can take some guesses, but they really lead me to more questions. I also wonder how much of these questions will get answered. I would expect to know how they're going to try to go to, or get Julian to go to Robin's Big Tree Grove. Like, I'm sure the author will answer that. I don't know if the author will answer the question about Sibley and his brother and Julian's dad. I just have to keep reading. Some questions get answered, other questions don't. With each breath, the block in his chest grew smaller and smaller until all he could feel was a dull ache. There was a small knock on his door, a pause, and then the shuffling of footsteps down the hall. A burst of Daphne's shrill laughter came from downstairs. Maybe math camp wouldn't be so bad, Julian thought. It couldn't be worse than Sibley's. He opened his dresser drawer. There was the High Sights Academy brochure Daphne had given him, and next to it, a small pocket knife. It was longer than a typical pocket knife, and slimmer, with a circle of silver initials at the base, JSC. Julian picked it up and ran his thumb along its burnished ivory handle. JSC. Julian, J, but SC are not his initials, right? Maybe they are. His last name is Carter Lee, remember? It's hyphenated, so maybe his middle name is like an S? Are those Julian's initials? I'm not sure. Anyway, he had a clear memory of taking the knife from his father's pocket and opening and closing the 2 blades, intrigued by the satisfying way they clicked into place. His father had said the initials stood for Julian Super Cleaver. I don't know what cleaver is either. It's funny. Julian set the knife back in the drawer and picked up the brochure. Inside, he read, "Is your gifted child being challenged by the math curriculum at his or her school? At High Sights Academy, we teach the concepts, study skills, and memorization techniques your child will need to succeed in the 21st century. Our unique approach to topics ranging from probability and statistics to recreational puzzle solving and to deep logic will make this summer a learning experience your child will never forget." Julian stared numbly at the words. His father would never have sent him to math camp. He loved crashing waves, storms, wild places. After a long moment, Julian picked up the telephone and called Danny. "Danny, it's me. Maybe you were right." "Of course I was," Danny said sleepily. "What are we talking about here?" "Do you really think I could get to Robbins? I mean, were you just being crazy, or do you really think it's possible?" "Be calm, Julian," Danny said, imitating the voice of Ms. Felicity, their favorite 5th grade teacher. "Anything's possible." "Forget it. I don't know what I'm thinking," Julian said. "I should just go to the math camp. It's not going to kill me." No. Be brave. "We make good plan," Danny said, caveman style. And then in his normal voice he added, "I'll sleep on it. My brain works better when I'm unconscious. I'll have a complete plan by 8 a.m. When he met Danny in the schoolyard the next morning, Julian half hoped he'd forgotten about their conversation the night before, but Danny immediately hustled over to him in the corner of the chain-link fence and said in a conspiratorial whisper, "I've got the plan all figured out. It's bulletproof." "Are you sure that's the right expression? First, the night before you go to camp, you sleep over at my house. Okay? You tell Daphne that we're going to take the math camp bus stop on Monday and pick you up 4 weeks later. Tell her that the day you get back is my birthday or something." This already sounds really complicated. "This way, Sibley and Daphne will never even know that you went to Robbins instead of to math camp." "If I don't show up at math camp, don't you think somebody's going to notice?" "We'll cancel. We'll wait until the last minute and we'll cancel." "Cancel how?" "Just call up and say you're not coming. My mom does it all the time. Hotels, car reservations, anything. The people who answer the phones, they don't care." "Oh, Danny, I don't know. I mean, Sibley would murder me if he found out. And I'd probably lose 10,000 points. Plus, how am I going to get to Robbins?" "Be calm." Danny closed his eyes and struck a meditation pose, floating his hands at his sides and touching his thumbs to his middle fingers. Abruptly, he stopped and said, "Work with me here?" "Wait, you think I should go up there without even telling my uncle?" "You want to tell Sibley that you're going to Robbins? Are you crazy?" "Well, I was thinking somehow we could trick him into letting me go." "Great," Danny said. "And how are you going to do that exactly?" Julian shrugged. "As Sherlock Holmes says, once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. Or in your case, it must be your plan. I know it can work. I have a vision. Unless you really want to spend your whole summer being tormented by overachievers." All through the next school day, Julian thought about the plan. Maybe Danny was right. Maybe it would work. Sibley and Daphne would think he was at math camp. He could see Huckleberry Ranch for himself. Robin sounded pretty nice, even if she did have a temper. She said her mom loved exchange students. The more he thought about the plan, the more he thought it might actually succeed if he and Danny were very careful and didn't make any mistakes. During class, he worked on his list of things to do. By lunchtime, it read, "Check with Robin if plan really is okay. 2. Figure out exchange student stuff. 3. Arrange sleepover at Danny's. 4. Cancel math camp. 5. Figure out how to get to Robin's house. 6. Figure out how to get home from Robin's house. 7. Get money." And then he couldn't think of anything else to add, even though he felt certain there must be more than 7 things he needed to do. During math, he added, 8. Get Sibley not to cut down the redwoods? That'll be easy, right? After the last bell, he met Danny in front of school and showed him the list. Very good. I can see you've given this a great deal of thought, Danny said, pulling on an imaginary beard. The plan can now begin. And that's the end of chapter 6. Interesting. The plan can now begin. I keep thinking about those steps. Okay, so I have to sometimes, when I've read a lot of information, I have to stop and do some summarizing, and then kind of see what questions I have left in my head. So just to be clear, it sounds like, and I may have to go back and reread this part, but it sounds like the plan is that Julian is supposed to stay over at Danny's the night before he's supposed to go to math camp, so that they don't notice that they're not trying to take him to the math camp bus. So he's going to stay over at Danny's that night. And then when he gets back, he's going to stay over at Danny's again, okay, so that they don't notice. Don't try this at home, kids. But then he still doesn't know how he's going to get to Robin's. He doesn't have any money. I am wondering, I have a lot of questions, really. How's he going to get to Robin's? Are they going to find out? How's it going to go when they cancel math camp? Have they already paid for math camp? I've got a lot of questions. More questions than answers. But I am excited that hopefully he'll get to go to Big Tree Grove and spend the summer with Robin instead of inside a classroom doing equations. All right, you guys, that is it for our remote story week. Next week, we'll go back to reading in person. And I'll see you a little bit later this afternoon for Hoot. I will say somebody requested that I show you some of my animals, so I'm going to try and make that happen. We're going to see if I can get them. They're kind of all over the place. Finn's out here with me now, but he's lazy. He's a lazy dog. He's just sleeping. So I'll try and see if Nora can get some of our animals to make a guest appearance. They're naughty. You guys have a great rest of your day. Be super kind and respectful to Ms. Wright. She's a champ for being here all week with us. We are so lucky to have her. All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye.